Ladies and gentlemen, in a few minutes you will see the documentary movie. When you look this film, keep in your mind that Russian people was the first victim of the communistic tyranny.
Years ago, the Russian autocracy was overthrown by a mass revolt, the February Revolution. You'll remember that the Russian calendar 1917 was still 13 days behind the Western European calendar, so that on the 9th of March, when the mass strikes began in Petrograd, it was still the 24th of February. The provisional government which emerged was faced from the start with enormous difficulties, to which after 8 months it succumbed. There was the determined assault of the extremist Bolsheviks headed by Lenin, whose scarcely disguised object was to overthrow it. There was disorganization, and there was war weariness. Of that provisional government, Mr. Kerensky, who is with us tonight in the studio, was first a prominent member and then Prime Minister. The events of these 8 months have given rise to much controversy, and historians and participants in the events have hotly debated a number of questions, such as, ought not the provisional government to have taken more energetic steps to prevent the Bolsheviks from accomplishing their purpose? Or should the powers allied with Russia have tried to help the new government by releasing Russia from her obligations to continue fighting the war? Or again, was Mr. Kerensky wrong in failing to reach some agreement with General Kornilov at a time when a military dictatorship seemed the only alternative to a Bolshevik victory? Mr. Kerensky, you have very kindly agreed to submit yourself to questioning by me on these and other points, and I should like to start by asking you to explain the circumstances in which the provisional government emerged and how it came about that you were, to begin with, the only socialist on it.
The February Revolution was a result of a dislocation, disintegration of the old century-old monarchic regime during the most difficult, terrible period of the First War, and when the ideas have the conservative, liberal, and moderate parties in the State Duma, in Russian Parliament, to force the emperor to abdicate in the name of his son and organize a regency. It was too late because in 24-25 February began a very strong movement of masses in participation with part of armies, and so it was a moment of extreme emergency, and temporary committee of the State Duma decided to create this provisional government.
The provisional government consisted mainly of moderate liberals, and you in fact were the only socialist member.
Yes.
Now, is this right? Side by side with the provisional government, there had emerged quite spontaneously these Soviets of the soldiers and peasants and workers, and these Soviets, the representatives from these Soviets were mainly socialists.
The leading people were socialists, Menshevik or socialist revolutionary, others, but the majority of members of Soviet, First Petersburg Soviet, were soldiers and workers, whom very few people was really socialist.
Yes, they were not necessarily party members, but they were generally off the left.
Yes, of the left, because...
Now, what was the relation between these Soviets and the provisional government?
It is some legend that from the beginning it was some kind of fight between Soviet and provisional government.
I think that's often found asserted.
Absolutely untrue, because you must understand that we, together with abdication of emperor, all the machinery of apparatus of government was destroyed. And from this collapse, by will of more conscious people, and in Duma, and in Soviet, and in public opinion in general, began the so-called February Revolution.
Yes. Now, I believe the Social Democrats and the Socialist Revolutionaries and the Soviets their doctrine prevented them from joining the provisional government, didn't it?
Yes, in the beginning it was a little too doctrinaire point of view.
Yes.
That first period of revolution, that it was 1 century ago in France, it will be
Yes.
Girondist period,
Yes.
Jacobin period, and now it is the time of the bourgeois
Yes.
government, and left parties and socialist party must support it, the government, if government will remain faithful of their promises to introduce in Russia not only purely democratic regime, but also to make some very important social reforms.
Yes. Well, now, how did that situation change? Because by May, I think, you were not any longer the only socialist member of the provisional government, but a number of other socialists had joined you.
Yes,
That is right, isn't it?
because from the beginning I was one of the very few people who have the feeling before the revolution that revolution is inevitable.
Yes.
This is a collapse of regime is inevitable, and when I saw the situation after revolution, after this explosion of government, I understood, and members of future provisional government understood also, that I must be between them.
You were, as it were, a bridge between the
Yes, and
extreme left and the moderates.
because by chance of history I have in this time very large authority in the masses.
Yes. Now, just one further question on that. To what extent, after May, were you able to rely on the executive committee of the Soviet for support in your policies?
Oh yes, it's also one of legend that Soviet provisional government was all time in some kind of fight with Soviets.
I see.
Yeah.
That is wrong.
It is wrong.
Yes, I see. Now, of course, you got no support from the Bolsheviks, who became more active after Lenin.
Yes, but by Bolshevik in this time played not very important role.
Still,
And
if I may,
excuse me, and they are in minority in
Yes.
the organization of so-called Soviet democracy.
yes, but by the beginning of April, after Lenin had returned, they began to play a very big part in subversive activity in the army. Is that right?
Yes, it was. The beginning was before the arriving of Lenin, but Lenin naturally gives some
Yes.
push of this
Yes.
movement, and
Yeah.
his slogan to make peace immediately and to
Yes.
overthrow the bourgeois capitalistic government. In the beginning, have no any serious response on the front and even in the workers' masses in Petersburg itself.
Not at first.
Yeah.
I believe you state in your writings, I think I'm right in this, you state in your writings that by the middle of April, you, the provisional government, were already satisfied that Lenin and the Bolsheviks were obtaining their funds for propaganda work in the army, subversive work in the army, from the Germans.
Yes.
And indeed the documents that have since been published, I think, have now established that. Now, the question that has crossed my mind, and I think has often been raised, is why was it that the provisional government, of which you were then a member, although not yet Prime Minister, why was it that the provisional government didn't, at that date, having this evidence, take effective action in order to
Because
bring these charges home to Lenin and his associates?
because for the public opinion, not only of socialist or left, but of general public opinion of Russia in this time, to think that a recognized leader, left leader, extreme left leader, but Russian man can to create some policy based on the collaboration with enemy of Russia. And so when we receive the new first proofs of these relations between Stockholm, between Lenin organization
Yes.
and some organization inside of Germany, we decided to make first very cautious and full investigation secretly, and to publish these documents when it will be all in our hands.
Does this summarize the position correctly? You, the government, were quite convinced that the charge was true, but in view of public opinion and in view of the shock that it would create, you felt that you must have every detail absolutely well established, and therefore you delayed bringing the charges. Now, of course, when one thinks of the army, one immediately thinks of the enormous part that the war played in this, and the enormous effect that the peace propaganda and the disorganization of the army played in the whole history of the fall of the provisional government. Now, if you, the provisional government, had been able, or indeed willing, to evade your military obligations under the terms of the alliance and to conclude a separate peace with the Germans at any time before the Bolshevik seizure of power in October, do you think that you would have survived as a provisional government as a result of that?
I don't know, but I know only one thing. It would be possible only through the civil war. Because you must remember that one of reasons for this strong movement against last emperor was this fear that some circles, not himself, but some circles very near to the throne, prepared the possibility of separate peace with Germany. And so in this time, all Russian public opinion, with enormous majority of so-called Soviet democracy and the army, were against any possibility to make some kind of pourparlers with Germany.
Yes.
And it was naturally that after this unexpected catastrophe, in a Russian army was the first time completely disorganized.
Yes.
But we restore, not completely, but we restore the discipline.
Yes.
And in May, I became Minister of Foreign Navy, especially for this mission to restore the discipline and to restore the combative force of Russian army.
And I may say, Mr. Kerensky, that I've read many accounts of the remarkable tour which you conducted on the front in May and June, and the very great support which at that time you received. So that it amounts to this, that even if you had ever contemplated making a separate peace with Germany, the result of that you think would have been civil war.
Oh yes, it's no question. It will be the same story than later, but 8 months before.
But 8 months before.
Yeah.
Yes. Was there in fact ever any plan of making a separate peace with the Germans?
No.
Never.
I receive after the suppression of first Bolshevik uprising in July, I received the separate peace proposition from Germany.
Yes.
And I answered no.
Yes.
One word.
You
No.
answered one word. No. Yes.
It
That
is
was
all.
in July. Now, may I come to another matter, and that is the affair which is associated with the name of General Kornilov, which was in August of 1917, again under the old calendar. Now, that is a matter about which there has been a very great deal of controversy, because I think you will agree that it was, in fact, the decisive moment. It was the turning point at which the provisional government was, as it were, doomed. Is that right? That after the Kornilov affair and was over, that was the moment.
Yes, because it is possible that all revolution have the different period of some kind of reaction,
Yes.
like Thermidor or
Yes.
in France, etc., Napoleon even.
Yes.
But it was premature, and it was just in August, in the end of August, during this after 6 months, some kind of normal life and reorganization of state institutes and self-governments, trade unions, etc., began to work. It was the best period of Russian revolution.
Do you mean that just before the Kornilov affair, life had begun to normalize?
Not completely normal,
No.
that it began to normalize.
Comparatively.
Comparatively
Yes.
normalized,
Yes.
and comparatively the situation in the front became much better and proof it is that from the May until the end of September, on the Russian front, it were the biggest, on the Russian front, was the biggest number of German troops during the whole First War.
Really? Yes.
Yes, because
that period. Yes.
Because the Russian Revolution demoralized, if you like, all Slavs in Austria, Slavish troops, and Turks don't like to fight against us when we declared that we are not interested to occupy the Dardanelles.
Yes.
So Germans were forced to send from the Western front the best divisions to the Russian front.
To the Russian front. Yes, I see. But may I come back to the Kornilov events? Now, as you know, quite a number of historians have asserted that there was no counter-revolutionary plot by Kornilov, that Kornilov was a patriotic general who had no aims to restore the monarchy, and who was solely concerned to restore order, and that you were in error when you declared him a counter-revolutionary and dismissed him from his command, because you could have come to terms with him, and that by so doing you alienated the army, and also by so doing you played into the hands of Lenin, who was able to exploit the situation to create his own Red Guard in the defense of the revolution, and within a couple of months to overthrow your government.
Yes.
That is what is said by a number of historians.
Yes, I see that you read too much all these memoirs and so-called history.
I have to.
Yeah,
I have to. It's
naturally.
my job.
But it is absolutely untrue.
Yes.
And my first book, published in 1918, after overthrown government, after my disappearance in Moscow, was the title was in English the Prelude of Bolshevism.
Yes.
Because first, General Kornilov have my full confidence. But my opinion was that it's not enough to be a good general. It is only to be necessary to have a general impression of situation in the country, international situation, and to make a policy in accordance with the possibility of today.
Yes.
See?
Yes, I follow
and,
that.
So now I have no time to make the details.
No.
But now, by some new documents and testimonies, the question of existed or not exist, the so-called plot
Yes.
of military people supported and instigated maybe by civil people is undisputable.
I see. So that it amounts to this, that you are now even more convinced than you were then in 1917 that there was really some counter-revolutionary
In all my books and all my speeches and articles, I always recognize that General Kornilov and other generals which colonels collaborate with him, they are very good Russian patriots. First. Second, they have no idea to restore in this time a monarchic regime.
No.
It was some kind of Bonapartistic movement, if you like.
Yes.
You see?
Yes,
But
this,
this as even...
may I interrupt you here?
Yeah,
Because,
please.
assuming, as you say it was some kind of Bonapartistic movement, do you think now that, supposing there had been a Bonapartistic movement, would that perhaps not have been better than Lenin's regime?
Yes, but it is question your if and if.
These things are better.
In if. Because this revolt of generals and of generalissimo, who are dominated by myself, was broken the confidence of the masses, not only in the army generals, but also in the provisional government. It was very important.
Yes.
And
it amounts to this, doesn't it? That as far as you saw it then, to come to terms with Kornilov was to abandon what you believed to be the ideals of the revolution.
No. after Kornilov, we have the possibility to restore the situation, and some other elements was introduced in this period. But I think it is now what we have the 40 years of beginning of this revolution. I must tell you the most important thing, the important is that February Revolution, which was created spontaneously, appears, was a realization of all desire, all dreams, all fight for the liberation, was the reconstruction of Russia as a free democracy based on the all human rights and social justice. Not only Russian foreigners, but not even the many Russians forgot that we, provisional government, in collaboration with all sane forces in Russia, we create a new agrarian situation. This nationalization and suppression of landlordism. We create a complete new system of local self-government based on the universal suffrage. We create the new situation for the workers as the best charter, if you like, for the trade unionism, etc., etc. And it is now, it is the most important to understand that all difference between Bolshevik communistic regime and democratic February Revolution is in this question. We are not reactionaries, we are not capitalists, we are not supported or fight for the pleasure of our foreign allies. It was as the biggest national aim to create new social regime in Russia based on social justice in accordance with desire of enormous majority, 80% of peasants and 10% of workers and intellectuals. It is our aim, was our aim, based on the untouchable, the all political, social and spiritual right of man. It is an essence of February Revolution. And now I am very glad that in present time, after this beginning of collapse of the communistic dictatorship, not only in Russia but in all world, these ideas of necessity to coordinate any social regime, I am for any kind of social regime, but only if this regime preserved the human dignity and based on the all political and social and spiritual rights of every human being. And now this Russia turned in this direction. It is the most important.
I wonder if I might, in conclusion, ask you one question, which is the kind of question that those who deal with history always dream of being able to ask those who make history. And that is, now, 40 years later, if you had your time over again, is there anything that you would want to do differently?
You see, it's a question very difficult to answer, but thinking of the past, I think if I will be more egocentric man, I will be never accepted the participation in the government in this critical and very indecisive and dangerous period of Russian history. But our duty was to save all possible which can to be saved. And until the last moment, you have forgot that was front and war, and our allies and Germans, both sides, and allies and Germans have the possibility during the war to make their own policy inside of Russia. Very often, even the allies not were in accordance in plans and criticize the provisional government. And I will tell you for the end, if in this time Allies will give us the same kind of unlimited support as they give to Stalin in the Second War, Russia, which was terribly exhausted physically, materially, etc., it will be stabilized, and the end of the war and the future of the Russia and maybe of all Europe will be completely different.